checking in as we move into our next unit, but also the next, I suppose, section of our course, you might say. The next genre we cover is poetry. My personal favorite, but we won't let that get in the way, right? So it's also feeling like spring, if we define spring as just not 5 degrees and snowing outside. I'm recording this on Friday, and I think it's, I don't know, 40 something and gale force winds, so let's call that spring, right? But it provides a nice segue into Unit 9, which I will look at here, where we discover, in addition to a few other things, the poet T.S. Eliot, who's a useful place to start for us because he was both a poet, obviously, pretty famous. You may have read something like The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock is often taught. Much more challenging, but equally maybe famous, is his long poem, The Wasteland. So you may have run into Eliot before. The Wasteland's one of those works that's, it's like very well known, but little read kind of a thing. But anyway, Eliot himself was both a poet, but also a critic or a theorist of poetry, a writer about poetry, not just a writer of poetry. So he provides us a nice entryway into the genre as both a practitioner of the art, but also a theorist of the art. So we can think about kind of both of those things at once. In fact, his Wasteland begins fairly famously, April is the cruelest month, which it may be if it's still 40 degrees and snowing for us at that point, but I guess we'll see. The speaker of that poem makes that statement ironically, but again, we can make our own judgments when our April finally rolls around. This is a fun unit, I think, because it offers you both a little bit of Eliot, but also a little more contemporary version of the poetic theory that he advances, which is delivered to us in this commercial for HP, some printer line or some, I don't know what the branding campaign they had going at the time was, featuring Gwen Stefani from No Doubt, and she's had her own, solo career. And so both are entryway into Eliot, or poetry through Eliot, but also this advertisement. They present theories of the poetic mind, or how poetry kind of works. And you'll notice that they're very, very similar. And I often wonder every time, I revisit this unit or I cover Eliot in other classes, is it purely coincidental? Is there just a kind of generic relationship between these ideas? Or, and I don't think this is unreasonable, obviously Stefani herself is not responsible for this particular advertising campaign, but I don't know what her background is. If she might have read Eliot at some point, or someone talked about Eliot, or talked about the nature of creative ideas, or certainly someone that's part of the marketing firm that put together the HP commercial, which isn't probably HP itself, but some Madison Avenue company. Those people come out of English programs often, so I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that at some point somebody involved in this contemporary reformulation of the idea may have run into it initially through Eliot. So it appears maybe coincidental and just fortuitous for our purposes, but there may be some deeper connections as to why these ideas expressed by Eliot now actually show up in this much more contemporary and 21st century mode. Anyway, there's an ebook here of The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Again, pretty famous. You may have run into it before. And then a quick discussion board. Not having us write poems yet necessarily, but really just priming the pump to get us thinking about poetry and how poetry works and how we can sort of view the world poetically as a means of ultimately producing poems ourselves. So a good opportunity then to go back to, as usual, both the due dates to see when Unit 9 is happening, but also right around the corner is our poetry workshop. So be thinking, a little further out. Notice that right after that is our final workshop, which is still a ways away, but it's open genre. So you're choosing a genre that we've worked in, that you want to maybe return to. So again, having that both the what's on your plate right away, but also that kind of longer view of what you'll be responsible for. And of course, you can look through the units themselves to see where we're at, but also where we're headed. And we're actually at about midterm, and then you throw in spring break as part of our the second 8 weeks in our class. And we are sort of getting towards the end. Again, the weather doesn't help it feel that way, but we actually are. There's a little midterm opportunity here for you to provide some feedback in the course so far. It is ungraded, anonymous, but really useful for me if you have some feedback. And I really like to hear if things are going well. So just because you don't have a complaint necessarily doesn't mean I don't want to hear from you. I like to know what works and what's keeping you on track, and all the good things too. All the good things, he says, hopefully. Okay, anyway, poets, have at her. Be in touch with me if you're having any questions or concerns, and I will talk to everybody soon.